Disinherited. Cast aside. They thought she was broken. But Alex held a secret. A hidden fortune. And a plan to bring her family's empire crashing down. What happens when the black sheep holds all the cards? Get ready for a tale of ultimate revenge. If you love stories of cunning comebacks and sweet justice, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Don't miss out on more epic revenge tales. Life had a peculiar way of testing Alex. For as long as she could remember, she had been the quiet observer in a family of boisterous personalities. Her father, Richard Sterling, was a titan of industry, a man whose presence filled every room he entered. He was shrewd, calculating, and fiercely protective of his empire. Alex, with her keen intellect and quiet determination, was often overlooked by her mother, Eleanor, and her two older siblings, Mark and Sarah, who reveled in the spotlight Richard's wealth provided. Yet it was Alex who shared a silent understanding with her father, a bond forged not in grand gestures but in shared glances across a crowded dinner table, a mutual appreciation for strategy, and a quiet ambition that mirrored his own. Richard's death was not sudden, but it was a shock nonetheless. A prolonged illness had slowly chipped away at his formidable strength, leaving behind a shell of the man he once was. The family gathered, a somber assembly of black suits and veiled faces, each person seemingly consumed by grief, though Alex suspected other emotions simmered beneath the surface for some. The air in the grand Sterling mansion was thick with unspoken expectations, a palpable tension that had nothing to do with mourning and everything to do with the impending reading of the will. 2 weeks after the funeral, Mr. Davies, the family's long-standing lawyer, arrived. His face, usually a mask of professional neutrality, seemed to carry a hint of unease as he settled into Richard's study, the very room where Alex and her father had spent countless hours discussing everything from global economics to the intricate mechanics of a vintage clock. Eleanor, Mark, and Sarah sat stiffly, their eyes darting between Mr. Davies and the thick, leather-bound document in his hands. Alex sat a little apart, a knot of apprehension tightening in her stomach. She knew her father. She knew his mind. And she had a chilling premonition that this would not be a straightforward affair. Mr. Davies cleared his throat, his voice resonating with a practiced solemnity. He began by outlining Richard's vast estate. The sprawling Sterling Corporation, numerous properties, offshore accounts, and a formidable art collection. Mark and Sarah exchanged triumphant glances, their smiles barely concealed. Eleanor dabbed her eyes with a lace handkerchief, a performance Alex had seen many times before. Then came the clauses, the specific bequests. Mark received the majority stake in Sterling Corporation. Sarah was granted the family's lavish summer estate and a substantial trust fund. Eleanor was provided with a generous lifetime annuity and ownership of the mansion. Finally, Mr. Davies's gaze fell upon Alex. Her heart pounded. She braced herself for the expected, a modest sum, perhaps a small property. Instead, his words landed like a cold slap. To my daughter, Alexandra Sterling, I bequeath my personal collection of antique chess sets. And this, her mother's locket. He held up a delicate silver locket, tarnished with age, a piece Alex vaguely remembered her mother wearing in old photographs, long before Eleanor had traded sentiment for status. That was it. Nothing more. No mention of a trust, no shares, no property. Just a few dusty chess sets and a locket. Silence descended, thick and suffocating. Then Mark burst out laughing, a harsh, derisive sound that echoed in the room. Chess sets? Seriously, Dad? He sneered, looking at Alex with undisguised contempt. Sarah joined in, a cruel smirk twisting her lips. Eleanor, abandoning her pretense of grief, looked at Alex with a mixture of pity and smug satisfaction. Well, dear, she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. It seems your father knew best after all. Some people just aren't cut out for responsibility. The humiliation was a physical blow. Alex felt her cheeks flush, her hands clenching into fists. She wanted to scream, to demand an explanation, but her voice caught in her throat. Mr. Davies, sensing the escalating tension, quickly concluded the reading, his eyes avoiding Alex's. As soon as he was done, Eleanor, Mark, and Sarah wasted no time. It's time for you to leave, Alex, Eleanor stated, her tone suddenly cold and authoritative. This is our home now. You have your chess sets. Go and enjoy them. Mark stepped forward, his imposing figure blocking the doorway. Don't let the door hit you on the way out, little sister. he taunted, a cruel glint in his eyes. Sarah stood beside him, a picture of disdain. Alex, her heart aching with a pain far deeper than mere financial loss, rose slowly. She clutched the locket in her hand, its cold metal a stark contrast to the burning shame she felt. She walked past them, her head held high despite the tears blurring her vision, out of the mansion that had once been her home, and into the harsh reality of a world that suddenly felt very, very cold. Despair was a heavy cloak, wrapping itself around Alex as she navigated the unfamiliar streets. Her father, her confidant, her mentor. How could he have done this? Had he truly seen her as so worthless, so incapable? The betrayal stung more than the loss of wealth. She found herself questioning everything, every shared moment, every quiet conversation. Was it all a lie? Was she truly just a forgotten shadow unworthy of his legacy? Yet, amidst the crushing weight of her grief and humiliation, a tiny, persistent voice whispered in the back of her mind. This was Richard Sterling. Her father was a man who never did anything without a reason. And that small, tarnished locket felt strangely heavy in her palm, as if holding a secret far greater than its humble appearance suggested. A seed of doubt, small but resilient, began to sprout in the barren landscape of her despair. She would find out why. She had to. This couldn't be the end of her story. This couldn't be her father's true intention. The first few months after her disinheritance were a blur of survival. Alex, with her sharp mind and unwavering resolve, refused to wallow in self-pity. She found a small, cramped apartment in a less affluent part of the city, far from the gilded cages of her past. Her days were spent navigating the labyrinthine world of job applications, her nights consumed by a relentless pursuit of knowledge. She took on freelance tech consulting gigs, leveraging the skills her father had subtly encouraged her to develop, skills her siblings had dismissed as mere hobbies. It was a stark contrast to her former life, but in the quiet solitude of her new existence, a different kind of strength began to emerge. One rainy evening, as she was packing away the few sentimental items she had salvaged, her gaze fell upon the antique locket Mr. Davies had handed her. It was a simple silver piece, intricately engraved with a swirling pattern, now dulled by time. Eleanor had worn it in a faded photograph, a young woman with a gentle smile, a stark contrast to the hardened matriarch Alex knew. Alex had always dismissed it as a trinket, a final cruel jest from her father. But tonight something felt different. The locket felt heavier, almost warm in her hand. She ran her thumb over the engravings, tracing the familiar patterns. Then her finger snagged on a tiny, almost imperceptible seam along the edge. With a delicate click, the locket sprang open, revealing not a faded photograph, but a minuscule, tightly folded piece of parchment. Her heart leaped. This was it. This was the clue she had instinctively known existed. Unfolding the parchment with trembling fingers, Alex found a series of seemingly random numbers and letters, interspersed with what looked like dates. It wasn't a message, not in the traditional sense, but a code. Her father, the master strategist, had left her a puzzle. A thrill, cold and exhilarating, shot through her. This was his game and she was ready to play. Her research began in earnest. The numbers and letters led her down a rabbit hole of old company records, obscure financial regulations, and forgotten property deeds. She spent countless hours in dusty archives, cross-referencing dates with market fluctuations, analyzing corporate mergers and acquisitions that had long since faded from public memory. Her freelance work became a cover, her late nights a necessity. She was driven by a hunger for truth, a need to understand her father's final enigmatic act. Her first significant discovery came after weeks of relentless digging. One of the dates on the parchment corresponded to a seemingly minor acquisition made by Sterling Corporation almost 2 decades ago. It was a small, struggling tech startup that had been quickly absorbed and then dissolved. On the surface, it was insignificant. But Alex, with her innate understanding of technology and her father's business acumen, knew better. She delved deeper, bypassing layers of corporate obfuscation, until she unearthed a series of encrypted files. With her advanced coding skills, she managed to decrypt them. What she found sent a chill down her spine. The startup, far from being a failure, had developed a revolutionary data encryption algorithm, a technology that could have been worth billions. But instead of integrating it, Richard had quietly spun it off into a separate, untraceable entity, a shell company hidden within a labyrinth of offshore trusts. This wasn't just a hidden asset. It was a ghost in the machine, a secret empire her father had built, completely off the books, completely unknown to Eleanor, Mark, or Sarah. The locket wasn't a cruel jest. It was the key to her true inheritance, a legacy far more valuable and dangerous than she could have ever imagined. And it was clear. Her father had known exactly what he was doing. He had protected his true wealth from the very people who now flaunted his name. While Alex meticulously pieced together the fragments of her father's hidden empire, her family was living a life of ostentatious excess, oblivious to the ticking time bomb beneath their feet. Mark, now the self-proclaimed CEO of Sterling Corporation, reveled in his newfound power. He bought a fleet of luxury cars, invested in dubious ventures, and hosted extravagant parties that bled the company's resources dry. Sarah, not to be outdone, embarked on a global shopping spree, renovating the summer estate into a monument of her own fleeting tastes, all funded by what she believed was an endless inheritance. Eleanor, content with her lavish annuity and the mansion, turned a blind eye to her children's profligacy, basking in the reflected glory of their perceived success. Alex watched from the shadows, her intelligence gathering more than just data. It gathered a chilling understanding of their true characters. She saw their arrogance, their entitlement, and their utter lack of foresight. It was a stark contrast to her father's meticulous planning and her own disciplined pursuit of knowledge. They were tearing down what Richard had built, not with malice, but with sheer unadulterated greed and incompetence. Her deeper dive into Richard's encrypted files revealed the full extent of his genius and his cynicism. The public will, the one that disinherited Alex and bestowed vast wealth upon Eleanor, Mark, and Sarah, was a masterstroke of misdirection. The Sterling Corporation, the properties, the art collection, all were indeed part of the inheritance. But they were also meticulously structured to carry a crushing burden of debt and legal liabilities. Richard, foreseeing his family's inability to manage true wealth responsibly, had set a trap. The assets they so eagerly claimed were not gifts, but rather anchors designed to drag them down. Alex discovered a series of high-interest loans taken out against the company's most valuable assets, loans that were set to mature rapidly, with penalty clauses that would cripple even a well-managed corporation. There were also pending lawsuits, cleverly buried in legal jargon, stemming from Mark's reckless business decisions and Sarah's extravagant renovations. Richard had ensured that anyone inheriting the public estate would be faced with a financial quagmire, a poison chalice disguised as a golden goblet. Her father, the ultimate strategist, had not disinherited her out of cruelty, but out of protection. He had known that his other children would squander his legacy, and he had created a separate, untraceable fortune, the encrypted data algorithm and its associated shell companies. For the one child he trusted to build something real. The locket, the chess sets, the seemingly insignificant items, were not insults but keys to a different kind of wealth, a wealth that required intellect and patience, not just a signature on a will. The realization was both a comfort and a chilling confirmation. Her father had seen their greed, had anticipated their actions, and had crafted a meticulous plan to ensure his true legacy, and his most deserving child, would prevail. Alex felt a surge of cold determination. The game was set. Her family, blinded by their avarice, was about to walk straight into the trap Richard had laid. And Alex, armed with her father's foresight and her own sharpened intellect, was ready to spring it. The time for quiet observation was over. The time for action was drawing near. She would not just reclaim what was hers, she would expose their true nature for the world to see. As the months turned into a year, the financial noose around Eleanor, Mark, and Sarah began to tighten. The initial euphoria of their inheritance had long since faded, replaced by a growing sense of panic. Mark's reckless investments had backfired spectacularly, leaving Sterling Corporation teetering on the brink of bankruptcy. The high-interest loans Richard had meticulously arranged were now demanding repayment, and the penalty clauses were astronomical. Sarah's lavish renovations had spiraled out of control, incurring massive debts and attracting the attention of aggressive creditors. Eleanor, once comfortable in her mansion, found herself facing mounting property taxes and maintenance costs that far exceeded her annuity. They tried to hide their mounting problems, maintaining a facade of wealth and success. But Alex, with her access to Richard's hidden financial network, saw every transaction, every desperate attempt to borrow more, every frantic call to lawyers. She watched as their carefully constructed world began to crack, piece by agonizing piece. The irony was not lost on her. They were destroying themselves with the very inheritance they had so greedily claimed. One afternoon, Alex received an unexpected call from Mr. Davies. His voice was strained, a stark contrast to his usual composed demeanor. "Alex," he began, "your mother and siblings are in a rather precarious situation. The creditors are closing in on Sterling Corporation, and the lawsuits against Sarah are reaching a critical stage. They've requested an emergency meeting to discuss Richard's will. They believe there must be some hidden clause, some secret fund they've overlooked." Alex's lips curved into a faint, knowing smile. The trap was about to spring. She agreed to attend the meeting not out of sympathy, but out of a cold, calculated desire to witness the culmination of her father's plan. The meeting was set for the following week, in the very boardroom where Mark had once gloated about his supposed inheritance. Alex spent the intervening days meticulously preparing, not just for the meeting but for the aftermath. She consolidated her control over Richard's hidden tech empire, ensuring its security and preparing it for its grand unveiling. She also gathered all the damning evidence of Mark's mismanagement and Eleanor's complicity in disowning her. When the day arrived, Alex walked into the Sterling Corporation boardroom with a quiet confidence that belied her past humiliation. Eleanor, Mark, and Sarah were already there, their faces etched with worry and desperation. The opulent room, once a symbol of their power, now felt suffocating, filled with the stench of their impending ruin. Mr. Davies sat at the head of the table, his expression grim. He looked at Alex with a hint of admiration, a silent acknowledgement of her transformation. Mark, his usual arrogance replaced by a desperate plea, spoke first. "Alex, we need your help. The company is in trouble. Dad must have left something, some emergency fund. You were always his favorite, he must have told you something." Sarah nodded frantically, her eyes wide with fear. Eleanor, for the first time, looked genuinely distraught. "Please, Alex," she pleaded, her voice cracking. "Your father wouldn't have wanted us to lose everything." Alex remained silent, her gaze sweeping over their desperate faces. She saw not family, but the architects of her past pain, the very people who had cast her aside without a second thought. The locket, now a symbol of her father's trust, felt warm against her skin. She had come not to save them, but to deliver justice. The storm had gathered, and it was time for the thunder to roll. She was ready to reveal the truth, the full, devastating truth of Richard Sterling's final brilliant act of revenge. The air in the boardroom was thick with anticipation, a suffocating silence broken only by the nervous fidgeting of Mark and Sarah. Eleanor sat rigid, her gaze fixed on Alex, a flicker of desperate hope in her eyes. Mr. Davies, ever the professional, cleared his throat. "As you all know," he began, his voice steady, "the Sterling Corporation and its associated assets are facing severe financial distress. Mark, Sarah, Eleanor, you have requested this meeting to explore any overlooked provisions in Richard Sterling's will that might alleviate your current predicament." He then turned to Alex. "Alex, your presence was requested by your family. Do you have anything to add to this discussion?" Alex rose slowly, her posture radiating a quiet power that commanded attention. She walked to the head of the table, placing a sleek, silver laptop on the polished mahogany. Her eyes, sharp and unwavering, met each of theirs in turn. "Indeed, Mr. Davies, I do." Her voice was calm, measured, devoid of the anger and hurt that had once consumed her. "My father, Richard Sterling, was a man of immense foresight. He knew his legacy would be challenged, not by external forces, but by internal greed." Mark scoffed. "What are you talking about, Alex? You got your chess sets. We got the company. Now if you have some secret fund, just tell us." Alex ignored him, her gaze sweeping over the room. "The will Mr. Davies read a year ago was indeed my father's last testament. But it was not his complete testament. It was a test of character, of responsibility, and of true understanding of wealth." Eleanor frowned. "A test? What nonsense is this?" The Sterling Corporation, the properties, the art collection you inherited, Alex continued, her voice gaining a subtle edge, were not just assets. They were liabilities, encumbered by massive, high-interest loans and pending lawsuits that my father meticulously arranged to mature precisely when they would cause maximum damage. He knew, Mark, that your reckless investments would accelerate this process. He knew, Sarah, that your extravagant spending would drain any remaining liquidity. And he knew, Mother, that your blind indulgence would allow it all to happen. Their faces, once desperate, now contorted in disbelief and dawning horror. Mark stammered. That's impossible. Mr. Davies, is this true? Mr. Davies, looking grim, nodded slowly. Richard's financial structuring was indeed complex. The public inheritance was, shall we say, a highly leveraged portfolio. The terms of the loans and the legal obligations are, unfortunately, ironclad. But why? Sarah cried, tears welling in her eyes. Why would Dad do this to us? Alex's eyes hardened. Because he knew you would squander it. He knew you would value immediate gratification over sustainable growth. He knew you would cast aside the one person who truly understood his vision, the one person who could have saved his company from your incompetence. She paused, letting her words sink in. He knew you would disinherit me, just as you did. She then turned her laptop screen towards them. While you were busy dismantling his empire, I was busy deciphering his true legacy. On the screen, a complex web of offshore accounts, shell companies, and encrypted data streams unfolded. This, Alex announced, her voice ringing with authority, is the true Sterling fortune, a revolutionary data encryption algorithm developed by a startup my father secretly acquired 2 decades ago, spun off into an untraceable entity, an entity worth not millions but billions. And the keys to this empire, the codes, the access were entrusted to me. Not in a will, but in a simple locket, a puzzle only I was meant to solve. Mark's jaw dropped. Sarah gasped. Eleanor stared, her face ashen, the realization of her colossal mistake finally dawning on her. You knew. Mark whispered, his voice barely audible. All this time. My father never disinherited me, Alex corrected, her voice cold and clear. He protected me. He protected his true legacy from your greed. He ensured that the one person capable of building something real, something lasting, would inherit what truly mattered. And that person, as you so kindly reminded me a year ago, is me. The silence that followed was deafening, filled with the shattered dreams and dawning despair of her family. The trap had sprung. And Alex, the quiet observer, had become the architect of their downfall, fulfilling her father's final, brilliant act of justice. The game was over and she had won. The price they had to pay was everything. And the price they had to pay was everything. The fallout from Alex's revelation was swift and brutal. The boardroom, once a stage for their avarice, became the scene of their public unraveling. Mark, his face a mask of utter defeat, was immediately stripped of his CEO title. The board, alerted to the massive debts and pending lawsuits, launched an internal investigation that quickly uncovered his gross mismanagement and reckless financial decisions. Sterling Corporation, once a beacon of stability, plunged into a crisis that would ultimately lead to its restructuring and a significant loss of family control. Sarah, confronted with the evidence of her extravagant spending and the legal quagmire she had created, found her assets frozen. The Summer estate, her monument to fleeting tastes, was seized by creditors. Her social circle, once so eager to bask in her reflected glory, quickly evaporated, leaving her isolated and facing bankruptcy. The very lifestyle she had so desperately clung to crumbled around her, a direct consequence of her own unchecked desires. Eleanor, perhaps the most profoundly affected, watched her carefully constructed world collapse. The mansion, her symbol of status and security, was now a constant reminder of her husband's calculated betrayal and her children's ruin. The realization that she had actively participated in disowning her most capable child, the one person who could have saved them, was a bitter pill to swallow. Her pleas for Alex's help were met with a cold, unwavering gaze. Alex had given them a chance, a year to prove themselves worthy, and they had failed spectacularly. Mr. Davies, though saddened by the family's demise, expressed a quiet admiration for Richard's foresight and Alex's intelligence. He became a key ally, helping Alex navigate the legal complexities of her father's true legacy. The encrypted data algorithm, now fully under Alex's control, was a goldmine. It was a technology that had only grown more valuable in the intervening years, a silent, powerful force in the digital world. Alex, no longer the quiet observer, stepped into her rightful place. She established a new company, built upon the foundation of her father's hidden tech empire. It was a company founded on innovation, integrity, and a clear vision for the future. She recruited a team of brilliant minds, people who valued merit over nepotism, and slowly, meticulously, she began to build something truly extraordinary. Her father's true legacy was not the crumbling Sterling Corporation, but this new, vibrant enterprise, a testament to his belief in her. Her siblings and mother, now stripped of their wealth and status, occasionally tried to reach out, their voices tinged with desperation and regret. Alex, however, maintained a polite but firm distance. The wounds of betrayal ran deep, and while she felt no joy in their suffering, she felt no obligation to rescue them from the consequences of their own actions. They had made their choices, and now they were paying the price. The locket, once a symbol of a painful past, now rested against her skin as a reminder of her strength, her father's wisdom, and the new empire she was building, brick by digital brick. The quiet engineer had become a formidable CEO, a testament to the power of resilience and the sweet, enduring taste of justice. Her father's plan had worked perfectly, and she was living proof of its success. Life, however, rarely follows a perfectly linear path, even for those who have meticulously planned their revenge. While Alex's new company, aptly named Phoenix Innovations, soared to unprecedented heights, a new set of challenges began to emerge. Her father's hidden tech, while revolutionary, was also a magnet for unwanted attention. Competitors, sensing a new player in the market, began to launch aggressive campaigns, attempting to reverse engineer her algorithms or poach her top talent. Alex, now a CEO, found herself constantly battling on multiple fronts, her days filled with strategic meetings, legal consultations, and the relentless pursuit of innovation. Adding to the complexity was the lingering shadow of her past. Mark, stripped of his position and facing mounting legal woes, became increasingly desperate. He began to spread malicious rumors about Alex, accusing her of corporate espionage and unethical practices, hoping to tarnish her reputation and destabilize Phoenix Innovations. Sarah, though less aggressive, would occasionally appear at industry events, her eyes filled with a mixture of envy and resentment, attempting to subtly undermine Alex's credibility with veiled comments and insincere congratulations. Eleanor, on the other hand, had retreated into a shell of her former self. The mansion, now too large and too expensive to maintain, was a constant reminder of her fallen status. She would occasionally send Alex cryptic messages, sometimes pleading for help, other times expressing a profound, albeit belated, regret for her past actions. Alex found herself torn. While she felt no obligation to rescue them, the emotional scars of her childhood ran deep, and Eleanor's fragile state stirred a flicker of something akin to pity, a feeling she quickly suppressed. One evening, a critical vulnerability was discovered in Phoenix Innovations' core encryption algorithm. It was a subtle flaw, expertly hidden, and clearly the work of someone with intimate knowledge of Richard Sterling's original code. Alex immediately suspected an inside job, or perhaps a lingering ghost from her father's past. The security breach threatened to expose not only Phoenix Innovations' proprietary technology, but also the very foundation of Richard's hidden empire. This wasn't just a corporate attack. It was a direct assault on her father's legacy and her own hard-won success. Alex worked tirelessly with her security team, tracing the digital footprints, analyzing the attack vectors. The more they dug, the more complex the web became. It led them to a shadowy consortium of tech giants, rivals who had long coveted Richard's genius and were now attempting to steal it from his daughter. But there was another layer, a faint, almost imperceptible trail that hinted at a more personal connection, a betrayal from within her father's inner circle, someone who knew the intricacies of his secret work. The pressure was immense. The future of Phoenix Innovations, and indeed her father's true legacy, hung in the balance. Alex realized that while she had successfully navigated the trap Richard had set for his greedy children, she was now facing a new, more dangerous game. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about survival. And to win, she would have to delve even deeper into her father's secrets, confront the ghosts of his past, and prove once again that she was more than just a disinherited daughter. She was a force to be reckoned with. The digital breach at Phoenix Innovations was more sophisticated than Alex had initially imagined. It wasn't a brute force attack, but a surgical infiltration, exploiting a backdoor that had been dormant for years, a signature of her father's early, more experimental coding. This wasn't the work of a rival corporation's generic cybersecurity team. This was personal, precise, and deeply unsettling. It pointed to someone who had not only known Richard Sterling intimately, but had also been privy to the deepest, most guarded secrets of his technological genius. Alex, with her team, meticulously peeled back the layers of the attack. The digital breadcrumbs led them not to the shadowy consortium of tech giants she had initially suspected, but to a single untraceable IP address, a ghost in the vast network of the Internet. This ghost, however, left a faint, almost nostalgic digital scent, a coding style, a specific algorithm, a unique digital fingerprint that Alex recognized with a jolt of recognition. It was the work of Dr. Eris Thorne, her father's former protege and closest confidant. Thorne, a brilliant but notoriously reclusive scientist, had vanished from the public eye years ago, shortly after a bitter falling out with Richard. The official story was a disagreement over intellectual property, but Alex had always suspected there was more to it. Thorne had been like an uncle to her in her childhood, a kind, eccentric man who had encouraged her early fascination with computers. The thought of him betraying her father, and now her, was a painful revelation. She confronted Mr. Davies, who, upon hearing Thorne's name, looked visibly shaken. "Eris Thorne," he murmured, his voice barely a whisper. Richard always said Thorne was the only one who truly understood his vision, but also the only one capable of truly undermining it. Their parting was acrimonious, to say the least. Richard believed Thorne had stolen some of his early research, but could never prove it. Alex, however, had proof. The encrypted files from her father's hidden tech empire contained not only the revolutionary algorithm, but also a detailed log of Thorne's unauthorized access attempts and data transfers from years ago, meticulously documented by Richard himself. Her father, ever the strategist, had anticipated this betrayal and had left a digital trail, a final damning piece of evidence. Armed with this knowledge, Alex knew she couldn't simply shut Thorne down. She needed to understand his motive, to confront the ghost of her father's past. She initiated a counter-infiltration, a delicate dance of digital espionage, to trace Thorne's current location and understand his intentions. What she discovered was a man consumed by bitterness, living in self-imposed exile, convinced that Richard had stolen his intellectual birthright. He saw Phoenix Innovations not as Alex's legacy, but as the stolen fruit of his own genius, a genius he believed Richard had suppressed. This wasn't just a corporate battle. It was a deeply personal vendetta, a clash of legacies, and a confrontation with a past Alex had barely known. She realized that her father's inheritance was not just about wealth or power. It was about protecting his vision, his true intellectual property, from those who sought to exploit or destroy it. And now it was her turn to defend it, not just from her greedy family, but from the ghosts of her father's past, a ghost who was far more dangerous than any corporate rival. The game had just gotten infinitely more complex, and Alex knew she had to play it perfectly to protect everything her father had truly valued.